Jake spent most of that night developing his plan while Zara sat quietly beside him, occasionally offering suggestions or corrections to his understanding of Velthani defensive techniques. By morning, he had filled several pages with diagrams and calculations that combined Zara's knowledge with his own observations about human behavior and the diverse alien population at the university. The core of Jake's idea was simple but revolutionary. Instead of trying to evacuate everyone or fight the Ravagers with conventional weapons, they would adapt the Velthani defensive techniques to work with multiple species acting in coordination. Zara had explained that her people use crystalline resonance patterns to disrupt the energy signatures of shadow feeders. But she had also mentioned that the technique required precise timing and coordination between many individuals. Jake realized that humans might be uniquely suited to provide that coordination. Throughout his months at the university, he had noticed that humans seemed to excel at organizing mixed groups and facilitating communication between species that had trouble working together directly, while other species often formed exclusive social groups. Humans naturally gravitated toward diverse friendships and collaborative projects. Zara was initially skeptical of the plan. She pointed out that the defensive techniques had been developed over thousands of years by a species that could communicate through direct crystalline contact and shared consciousness. Trying to adapt these methods to work with aliens who communicated through speech and gesture seemed almost impossible. But Jake had observed something during his time at the university that gave him confidence. Human students regularly succeeded at group projects that brought together species with completely different communication styles, work habits, and cultural backgrounds. Humans seem to have an intuitive ability to find common ground and create functional teams from diverse individuals. Jake proposed that they test this theory by assembling a small group of students from different species and seeing whether they could work together under human coordination to create something similar to Velthani crystalline resonance. Zara agreed to help, though she remained doubtful about whether other species would be willing to work with her once they learned her true nature. They began by approaching students that Jake had identified as being both intelligent and open-minded. Their first recruit was Lisa, a human engineering student who had been working on projects involving harmonic frequencies. Jake explained that they were developing an experimental defense against the Ravagers, and Lisa immediately volunteered to help without asking many questions. Next, they found Marcus, a human physics student who specialized in energy field manipulation. Marcus was fascinated by Jake's description of crystalline resonance patterns and eager to contribute his knowledge of wave mechanics and frequency modulation. The challenge came when they needed to recruit non-human students with relevant abilities. Jake had identified several alien species on campus that possessed natural talents that might complement Velthani defensive techniques, but convincing them to work with an unknown human team will require careful diplomacy. Their breakthrough came when they approached Alex, a Zephyrian student whose people could manipulate electromagnetic fields through bioelectric organs. Alex had been struggling to find an evacuation ship that could accommodate his species' unique atmospheric requirements, and he was desperate enough to try alternative solutions. Jake explained their plan in general terms, focusing on the scientific principles rather than revealing Zara's true nature. Alex listened carefully and agreed to participate, bringing with him two other Zephyrian students who possessed similar abilities. The group grew over the next day as word spread through informal networks about a student-led research project that might offer an alternative to evacuation or military defense. Jake found himself coordinating communications between species that normally had little contact with each other, translating concepts between different scientific traditions, and helping diverse personalities work toward common goals. Rachel, a human xenobiology student, joined after hearing about the project from Lisa. She brought with her knowledge of interspecies physiology that proved crucial for understanding how different aliens might contribute to the coordinated defense effort. Two crystalline singers, a species that communicated through harmonic vibrations, volunteered after learning that the project involved frequency manipulation. Their natural abilities complemented the Zephyrian electromagnetic manipulation in ways that none of the humans had. Anticipated. Jake realized that his role was becoming less about scientific contribution and more about human coordination and leadership. He found himself naturally facilitating discussions, mediating disagreements, and helping the diverse group maintain focus on their shared objective. The other humans in the group seemed to fill similar roles, acting as bridges between alien team members who might otherwise have difficulty working together. As the group expanded, Jake faced the growing challenge of keeping Zara's secret while still utilizing her essential knowledge. He developed a system where Zara would share technical information with him privately, and he would then present it to the group as theoretical concepts that needed testing and refinement. The deception became more difficult when Alex asked direct questions about the source of their information regarding crystalline resonance patterns. Jake deflected by explaining that they were drawing on multiple xenobiology research sources, but he could see that some team members were becoming suspicious about the gaps in his explanations. The crisis came when the group attempted their first practical test of the resonance coordination technique. Working in the university's physics laboratory, they tried to create a harmonic field that could disrupt a simulated energy signature. The test failed completely, and several team members began questioning whether their approach had any scientific basis. Jake realized that they needed Zara's direct involvement to make progress, which meant revealing her true nature to the entire group. He called a meeting that evening and asked everyone to gather in his apartment, knowing that this decision would either unite the team around a real solution or destroy their collaboration entirely. Zara was terrified about revealing herself to so many aliens at once, but she agreed that they had run out of alternatives. Jake addressed the group first, explaining that they had been working with incomplete information and that their team included someone with direct knowledge of defensive techniques that had proven effective against entities similar to the Ravagers. When Zara shifted to her true crystalline form in front of the assembled students, the reactions were exactly what she had feared. Two of the aliens immediately backed away in alarm, while others stared in shock and confusion. For several minutes, the room was filled with overlapping voices as different species tried to process what they were seeing, but Jake had chosen his team members well. After the initial shock subsided, their scientific curiosity began to override their fear. Marcus was the first to ask technical questions about Zara's crystalline structure, followed by Alex inquiring about the bioelectric properties of her natural form. Lisa approached Zara directly and asked to examine the light patterns flowing across her surface, recognizing them as a form of communication that might be crucial to their defensive strategy. The crystalline singers began harmonizing with the frequencies that Zara's body naturally generated, creating resonance patterns that filled the room with beautiful, complex music. Within an hour, the group had transformed from a collection of frightened individuals into an integrated team focused on understanding and adapting Zara's knowledge. Jake watched in amazement as his human teammates naturally took on coordination roles, helping alien members communicate with each other and organizing the rapid exchange of technical information. For the first time since learning about the Ravager threat, Jake felt genuinely optimistic about their chances of success. The group had proven that different species could work together effectively under human leadership, and they were finally making real progress toward developing a functional defense system. Jake was studying in the university library when the emergency alert system activated. The familiar chime echoed through the building, followed by an announcement that all students should report to their dormitories immediately. The librarian looked worried as she began directing everyone toward the exits, but she could not provide any details about what was happening. Jake gathered his books and headed home, joining streams of confused students walking across campus. The usual chatter and laughter was replaced by nervous whispers and concerned phone calls. Security guards were posted at major intersections, and Jake noticed several alien species he had never seen before moving quickly between buildings in what looked like official business. When Jake reached his apartment, he found Zara sitting in front of their small television, with an expression of deep concern on her face. The news was showing reports from across the galaxy about something called the Ravagers, a hostile faction that had been systematically attacking colony worlds for the past several months. Zara explained what she had learned from the news reports and from communications with other students. The Ravagers were energy-based entities that consumed organic matter for sustenance. They traveled in massive swarms that could strip entire planets of all biological life within days. No one knew where they came from or why they had suddenly become aggressive, but their attacks were becoming more frequent and more destructive. Jake sat down beside her and watched the footage from recent attacks. The images were disturbing, showing once thriving worlds reduced to barren rock within days of a Ravager assault. The entities themselves appeared as shifting clouds of dark energy that moved with purpose and intelligence, engulfing everything in their path. The news anchor explained that the Ravagers had been detected approaching their star system and would likely reach the university planet within the next few days. The Planetary Defense Force was mobilizing, but early reports suggested that conventional weapons had little effect against the energy-based attackers. Over the next 24 hours, the atmosphere on campus became increasingly tense. Classes were canceled, and students gathered in groups to share information and rumors about the approaching threat. Some alien species began evacuating immediately, while others seemed confident that the planet's defenses would be sufficient. To repel the attack, Jake and Zara attended an emergency meeting in the main auditorium where university officials tried to provide reassurance and information. The Planetary Defense Coordinator explained that evacuation ships were being prepared, but that there was not enough transportation to move everyone off planet before the Ravagers arrived. Priority will be given to younger students and members of endangered species. The coordinator also announced that anyone with military experience or specialized knowledge relevant to the crisis should report to the Emergency Command Center. Jake noticed that very few students volunteered, and most of those who did were from warrior species that had dealt with similar threats before. As they walked home from the meeting, Jake found himself thinking about something Zara had mentioned weeks earlier during one of their conversations about her homeworld. She had described natural predators on Velthera that fed on crystalline life forms, entities that sounded remarkably similar to the Ravagers based on the news reports. That evening, Jake asked Zara more detailed questions about these predators. She told him about creatures called shadow feeders that appeared as dark energy clouds and consumed the crystalline structures that her people use for shelter and communication. The shadow feeders had been a constant threat on Velthera for thousands of years, forcing the Velthani to develop sophisticated defensive techniques and early warning systems. Jake felt excitement building as he realized the implications. He asked Zara whether the shadow feeders from her world might be related to the Ravagers that were approaching their planet. She admitted that the similarities were striking, but said she had never considered the possibility that the same type of entities might exist in other parts of the galaxy. Zara explained that her people had learned to defend against shadow feeders by using specific frequencies of crystalline resonance that disrupted the entity's energy patterns. The technique required precise timing and coordination between multiple Velthani working together, but it had proven effective at driving away the predators without causing permanent harm to either side. Jake asked why she had not mentioned this information at the emergency meeting, and Zara looked uncomfortable. She explained that revealing her knowledge would require her to admit her true nature to the university officials, something she was not prepared to do. She also pointed out that the defensive techniques required multiple Velthani working in their natural crystalline forms, and she was the only member of her species at the university. Jake spent that night thinking about the problem from every angle he could imagine. The Planetary Defense Force seemed focused on military solutions that had already proven ineffective against similar entities. The evacuation plans were inadequate and would leave thousands of students and faculty stranded when the Ravagers arrived. Zara possessed knowledge that might be crucial to defending the planet, even if she could not implement the solutions alone. Jake began to think about alternative approaches that might allow them to adapt Velthani, defensive techniques to work with the resources and personnel they actually had available. The next morning brought more disturbing news. Long-range sensors had detected the Ravager swarm moving faster than expected, and the estimated time of arrival had been shortened to less than 48 hours. Several transport ships had left during the night carrying the first wave of evacuees, but the vast majority of the university population remained on planet. Jake attended another emergency meeting where the defense coordinator presented their military strategy. The plan involved positioning defensive satellites in orbit around the planet and using concentrated energy weapons to break up the Ravager swarm before it could reach the surface. Jake could see from the faces in the audience that very few people had confidence in this approach. During the question period, Jake stood up and asked whether the Defense Force had consulted with students or faculty who might have relevant knowledge about energy-based entities. The coordinator replied that they were working with their best military scientists and did not need input from untrained civilians. Jake felt frustrated by the dismissive response, but he also realized that the coordinator was probably under enormous pressure in dealing with information from dozens of different sources. After the meeting, Jake decided that he needed to find a way to get Zara's knowledge to people who could use it, even if it meant taking significant risks. That afternoon, Jake and Zara walked around campus, observing the preparations for the evacuation and defense efforts. They saw military personnel setting up communication equipment, transport ships loading supplies and passengers, and groups of students from various species discussing their plans for survival. Jake noticed that different alien species were responding to the crisis in very different ways. Some were working together to share resources and information, while others were focusing entirely on protecting members of their own species. The humans on campus seemed to be somewhere in the middle, helping where they could, but also looking out for their own survival. As they watched a group of students from different worlds trying to coordinate their evacuation plans, Jake had an idea that would change everything. He realized that the solution to the Ravager threat might not require advanced military technology or evacuation ships. Instead, it might require something that was abundant at the university, but had never been properly utilized: the diversity of knowledge and abilities, represented by hundreds of species working together. Jake looked at Zara and said that he thought he knew how to stop the Ravagers, but that it would require her to trust him completely and to reveal her true nature to others. The expression on her face told him that she understood the magnitude of what he was suggesting, and that she was as frightened of that prospect as she was of the approaching threat. Over the next few weeks, Jake found himself learning more about Zara and her people than he had ever imagined possible. Their evening conversations became the highlight of his day, as she shared stories about Velthani culture, and he asked endless questions about her biology and abilities. Zara showed him small demonstrations of her shape-shifting abilities. She could change the color of her skin, make her hair longer or shorter, and even alter her height by a few inches. Jake watched in fascination as she explained that these minor changes required very little energy, while major transformations like taking on a completely different species appearance demanded enormous mental and physical effort. She told him that maintaining her human form for months at a time was exhausting, but that she had been doing it for so long that it had become almost automatic. She compared it to holding a difficult yoga pose for hours at a time, requiring constant concentration and muscle control. Jake learned that Zara could also manipulate crystalline structures in ways that seemed like magic to him. She showed him how she could make small crystal formations grow from minerals in their tap water, creating delicate sculptures that caught and refracted light in beautiful patterns. She explained that this ability was as natural to her people as humans using their hands to shape clay. One evening, Zara demonstrated her species' most impressive ability. She created what she called a communication web by spinning nearly invisible crystal threads between her fingers. The threads formed a complex geometric pattern that glowed softly with different colors. She explained that Velthani used these webs to share thoughts and memories across vast distances, creating networks that could span entire continents on her home world. Jake was amazed as he watched the web pulse with different colors and patterns. Zara told him that each color represented different types of information, and that skilled web weavers could encode entire books worth of knowledge into a single thread. She said that her people's greatest libraries were actually massive crystalline structures that stored millions of years of accumulated wisdom. In return for learning about her culture, Jake shared human customs and behaviors that Zara found equally fascinating. She was particularly interested in human social dynamics, which she found much more complex and unpredictable than those of her own species. Jake explained concepts like sarcasm, practical jokes, and small talk, all of which were foreign to Velthani culture. He told her about human festivals, sports, and the way humans form friendships through shared activities rather than just shared thoughts. Zara listened with intense curiosity, asking questions that made Jake think about his own species in new ways. She was especially puzzled by human fears and phobias. Jake tried to explain why many humans were instinctively afraid of spider-like creatures, even harmless ones. He told her about evolutionary psychology and how ancient survival instincts still influence modern human behavior. Zara found it strange that humans could be afraid of something while simultaneously being curious about it. Jake also helped Zara understand why she had trouble making friends with other students at the university. He explained that her perfectly polite behavior actually made her seem distant and unfriendly to humans who expected more casual and spontaneous interactions. He taught her about facial expressions, body language, and the subtle social cues that humans use to show interest and build connections. Zara began practicing more natural human behaviors, and Jake noticed that other students started responding to her more positively. She learned to make small talk about the weather, to laugh at mild jokes even when she did not fully understand them, and to show interest in topics that bored her. Jake felt proud watching her navigate human social situations. With growing confidence, their academic work also began to overlap in interesting ways. Jake was studying xenobiology with a focus on interspecies adaptation, while Zara was working on advanced quantum physics theories that related to crystalline structure manipulation. They discovered that combining their knowledge created insights that neither could have reached alone. Zara helped Jake understand complex biological processes by relating them to the way her people manipulated their own crystalline matrices. She explained concepts like quantum entanglement and dimensional folding using examples from Velthani technology that made abstract physics theory suddenly clear to him. Jake contributed his knowledge of evolutionary biology and adaptation strategies, helping Zara understand how different species might approach the same problems in completely different ways. He taught her about biodiversity, genetic variation, and the way competition and cooperation shaped the development of different life forms. Together, they worked on a research project about crystalline-based life forms for Jake's xenobiology class. Zara provided first-hand knowledge about how her people's biology actually functioned, while Jake analyzed the information through the lens of established scientific theory. Their professor was impressed by the depth and originality of their research, though he had no idea that one of his students was actually a living example of the species they were studying. Jake also learned about the challenges Zara faced as a member of a rarely seen species trying to integrate into galactic society. She told him about the prejudice and fear that Velthani encountered from most other species, and how her people had become increasingly isolated as a result. Many Velthani chose to live in crystal cities on their home world, rather than risk the rejection and misunderstanding they face. When traveling to other planets, Zara explained that she was part of a small group of young Velthani who believed their species needed to find ways to interact more successfully with the rest of the galaxy. She had volunteered to attend the Galactic Exchange University as part of an experimental program to test whether Velthani could function in mixed-species environments. Jake began to understand the courage it had taken for Zara to leave her home world and live among aliens who might fear or reject her if they knew her true nature. He admired her determination to bridge the gap between her people and the rest of galactic civilization, even though it meant living a constant lie about her identity. As their friendship deepened, Jake noticed changes in himself as well. He became more observant of the subtle ways that different alien species interacted with each other at the university. He started paying attention to which groups mixed easily and which ones seemed to avoid each other, and he began to understand the complex social dynamics that shaped interspecies relationships. He also found himself becoming more confident in his studies and more curious about aspects of xenobiology that had previously seemed too advanced for him. Zara's explanations helped him grasp concepts that had confused him in class, and her unique perspective on biological processes gave him insights that impressed his professors. Most importantly, Jake realized that his fear of Zara's true form had completely disappeared. When she occasionally showed him her natural crystalline features during their evening conversations, he found himself appreciating the beauty and elegance of her real appearance. The flowing lights that had once seemed alien and frightening now reminded him of aurora displays or deep ocean bioluminescence. Their apartment began to feel like a safe space where both of them could be completely honest about themselves. Jake looked forward to coming home each day, knowing that he would learn something new about his remarkable roommate and her fascinating people. He began to think that their friendship was teaching him as much about humanity as it was about the Velthani, and that understanding Zara was helping him understand himself and his own species in ways he had never expected. Jake barely slept that night. Every small sound in the apartment made him jump, and he kept replaying the image of the crystalline creature in his mind. He had convinced himself several times that it was all a dream or hallucination, but the memory felt too real and too detailed. By morning, he had dark circles under his eyes and felt exhausted. He stumbled to the kitchen around 7 in the morning, hoping coffee would help clear his confused thoughts. Zara was already there, sitting at their small dining table with a cup of tea and what looked like homework spread out in front of her. She looked exactly as she always did, tall and pale with her silver eyes focused on her work. Jake tried to act normal as he started the coffee maker, but he kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye. She seemed completely ordinary, wearing jeans and a blue sweater, her white hair braided as usual. There was nothing about her that suggested any connection to the terrifying and beautiful creature he had seen the day before. Zara looked up from her papers and smiled at him. The smile seemed a little forced, and Jake noticed she was watching him more carefully than usual. Jake poured his coffee and sat down across from her, trying to think of something casual to say. Before he could speak, Zara closed her textbook and folded her hands on the table. She took a deep breath and said in her quiet voice with its slight accent that Jake could never identify the origin of. Her silver eyes met his directly for the first time since he had known her, and he saw something in them that looked like nervousness mixed with determination. She said that they needed to talk about what happened yesterday afternoon. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. His heart started beating faster as he realized that somehow she knew he had seen something he was not supposed to see. He tried to play innocent and asked what she meant, but Zara shook her head. She said she knew he had come home early from class and that he had seen her in the bathroom. She said she could tell by the way he was acting that morning and that she had heard him moving around in the hallway after her cleansing ritual. Jake set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. He asked her what that thing in the bathroom had been and whether she was hurt or in danger. He said he had been worried about her all night and had almost called campus security. Zara was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she said that the creature he had seen was her. Jake stared at her in complete confusion, looking back and forth between her human appearance and trying to imagine how that was possible. She explained that her people were called the Velthani and that they were natural shapeshifters. She said that the form he was used to seeing was not her real body, but a shape she had learned to take to make other species more comfortable around her. Her true form was what he had glimpsed in the bathroom during her cleansing ritual. Jake felt like His brain was trying to process too much information at once. He asked her to explain how that was possible and why she had never told him. His voice came out louder than he intended, and Zara flinched slightly. She said that most humans found her true species terrifying to look at. The Velthani resembled what humans called spiders, but they were made of living crystal and light instead of flesh and bone. She explained that very few humans could handle being around her people in their natural form, and that most alien species preferred to interact with Velthani, who could shapeshift into more familiar appearances. Zara said she had to return to her true form regularly to maintain her health and mental balance. The cleansing ritual he had seen was necessary for her people, involving special liquids that helped maintain their crystalline structure. She said she had thought he would be at class for several more hours and that she had been careless about making sure the bathroom door was fully closed. Jake rubbed his forehead, trying to absorb everything she was telling him. He said he needed a minute to think, and Zara nodded and waited patiently while he processed the information. After several minutes of silence, Jake looked at her again. He said that what he had seen was scary at first, but also incredibly beautiful. He described the way the light had moved across her crystalline body like flowing water, and how graceful her movements had been despite her size. He said it reminded him of some of the more exotic spiders he had studied in biology classes, but far more magnificent. Zara looked surprised by his reaction. She said that most humans either screamed, fainted, or ran away when they saw her true form. Some had even become violent, thinking she was a monster or a threat. She said that was why the Velthani usually avoided direct contact with other species, and why she had never told him the truth about herself. Jake asked her more questions about her biology and her home planet. He wanted to know how the shape-shifting worked, what her crystalline structure was made of, and whether all of her people could change their appearance. His scientific curiosity was overriding his initial fear, and he found himself fascinated by the implications of what she was telling him. Zara seemed to relax as she realized he was not going to reject her or demand that she move out. She began explaining more about Velthani biology and culture. She said her people could manipulate their crystalline structure at the molecular level, allowing them to take on different shapes and forms. The process was mentally exhausting and required regular rest periods in their natural state. She told him about her homeworld, which was covered in vast crystal forests that sang in harmonious frequencies when the wind blew through them. She said her people communicated through patterns of light and color as much as through sound, and that they could share thoughts and emotions by touching their crystalline surfaces together. Jake found himself asking question after question, his fear completely replaced by scientific fascination. He asked about her diet, her lifespan, how her people reproduced, and whether there were other Velthani students at the university. Zara answered each question patiently, seeming relieved to finally be able to talk openly about herself. As the morning went on, Jake began to understand why Zara had always seemed a little distant and formal around him. She had been constantly maintaining a false appearance and hiding her true nature. The effort must have been exhausting, and the isolation of never being able to be yourself around others must have been incredibly lonely. He told Zara that he was grateful she had trusted him enough to tell him the truth. He said he understood why she had kept it secret, but that he wished she had felt safe enough to share it sooner. He promised that he would never tell anyone else about her true nature without her permission. Zara smiled, and for the first time since Jake had known her, it looked completely genuine. She said that having someone who knew the truth and accepted her felt like a tremendous relief. She had been carrying the burden of secrecy alone for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be honest about herself. Jake realized that their friendship was just beginning, and that everything he thought he knew about his quiet roommate had been only the surface of a much more complex and interesting person. Jake Miller pushed open the front door of his small apartment and kicked off his wet sneakers. The rain had started just as he left his xenobiology class early, and now his backpack dripped water onto the worn carpet. He dropped the heavy bag by the door and stretched his tired shoulders. Professor Kim had dismissed him 30 minutes early when the lab equipment malfunctioned, which meant Jake had the rest of the afternoon free. His roommate Zara had mentioned. That morning she would be at the library until late evening, working on some advanced quantum physics project that Jake could never understand. The apartment felt quiet and empty as he walked through the small living room toward his bedroom. He planned to change into dry clothes, maybe grab a snack, and then tackled the pile of homework that seemed to grow larger each day. The Galactic Exchange University attracted students from dozens of different worlds, and living with an alien roommate had become normal for Jake over the past 6 months. Zara was from a planet called Veltera, and she looked almost human except for her unusually pale skin and bright silver eyes. She stood nearly 6 feet tall with long white hair that she always kept in a neat braid. Jake found her quiet and polite, though sometimes distant in the way that many alien students seem to be around humans. Their apartment was nothing special, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and 1 bathroom that they shared. The university housing office had paired them up based on compatible study schedules and dietary requirements. Zara ate mostly fruits and vegetables, which worked fine for Jake since he lived on pizza and instant noodles most of the time. Anyway, as Jake walked past the bathroom, he heard the sound of running water. He stopped and frowned. Zara had definitely said she would be gone all day. Maybe she had come back early like he had, or maybe he had misunderstood her schedule. The sound was strange, though, not like a normal shower. It was more rhythmic, like water being poured in patterns. Jake shrugged and continued toward his room. He pulled off his damp shirt and tossed it into the laundry basket. His stomach growled, reminding him that he had skipped lunch again. The refrigerator probably held nothing but leftover Chinese food and some of Zara's weird purple fruit that tasted like soap to him. He grabbed a clean shirt from his dresser and headed back toward the kitchen. The bathroom door was slightly open and steam drifted out into the hallway. Jake glanced toward it without thinking. Just a casual look as he passed by. What he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. Through the gap in the door, Jake could see into the bathroom clearly. What he saw was not Zara, as he knew her. Instead, a massive creature filled most of the small space. It looked like a giant spider, but made of what appeared to be living crystal. Its body was translucent and caught the bathroom light in strange ways, creating rainbow patterns that shifted and moved across its surface. The creature had 8 long legs that ended in delicate points, and each leg seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as its body. Most shocking of all, the entire creature glowed with soft blue and green lights that pulsed in slow rhythms like a heartbeat. The patterns of light flowed across its body like water, beautiful but completely alien. Jake realized he had stopped breathing. His mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The creature was clearly intelligent, moving with purpose as it manipulated something Jake could not see clearly. It was performing some kind of ritual or cleansing using what looked like liquid. Light that it poured over different parts of its crystalline form. The creature suddenly turned, and Jake saw what might have been its face. Instead of eyes, it had clusters of small lights that flickered and pulsed. For one terrible moment, Jake thought those lights were looking directly at him. His heart hammered in his chest as pure instinct told him to run. Jake stumbled backward, his shoulder hitting the wall with a soft thud. The sound seemed incredibly loud in the quiet apartment. He pressed himself against the wall, trying to become invisible, his mind racing with confused thoughts. What was that thing? Where was Zara? Was she hurt? Had some alien creature broken into their bathroom? He forced himself to think logically. The creature was clearly intelligent and seemed to be performing some kind of personal hygiene routine. It had not acted aggressive or dangerous, but it was enormous and completely unlike anything Jake had studied in his xenobiology classes. The university had strict policies about dangerous alien species on campus. Jake crept quietly toward his bedroom, his bare feet silent on the carpet. He reached for his phone to call campus security, then stopped. What would he tell them? That a giant crystal spider was using his bathroom. They would think he was crazy or playing a prank. He sat on his bed, still holding the phone, and tried to calm down. His hands were shaking slightly, and he realized he was more scared than he wanted to admit. The creature had been beautiful in a terrifying way, like looking at a living jewel that could probably kill him without effort. Minutes passed as Jake sat in his room, listening to the continued sounds of water from the bathroom. Whatever the creature was doing, it was taking its time. Jake found himself wondering about the patterns of light he had seen flowing across its body. They had seemed almost like a language, or maybe a way of expressing emotion. The water sounds finally stopped, and Jake heard movement in the hallway. He pressed his ear to his bedroom door and listened carefully. Footsteps moved past his room, toward Zara's bedroom. Normal human footsteps, not the clicking sounds he would expect from something with 8 crystalline legs. Jake waited another 10 minutes before he worked up the courage to leave his room. The hallway was empty, and the bathroom door was now closed. Everything looked completely normal, as if nothing strange had happened. He could hear soft music coming from Zara's room, the kind of ambient sound she often played while studying. He walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, though he had completely lost his appetite. His mind kept replaying what he had seen, trying to make sense of it. Had he imagined the whole thing? Maybe the stress of midterm exams was getting to him more than he realized, but the image of the crystalline creature was burned into his memory with perfect clarity. The way the light had moved across its surface, the graceful way it had moved despite its size, and especially those clusters of lights that might have been eyes. Jake knew he had not imagined any of it. He closed the refrigerator and leaned against it, staring at the ceiling. If that creature was real, then where was Zara? And why had it been in their bathroom, performing what looked like some kind of personal ritual? The more he thought about it, the more questions filled his mind. Jake decided he would have to ask Zara about it when she came home from the library. Maybe she had seen the creature too, or maybe she knew what it was and why it had been in their apartment. He hoped she was safe, wherever she was. As he walked back to his room, Jake glanced toward Zara's closed bedroom door. The music was still playing softly, but somehow the apartment felt different now, as if he was sharing the space with something far more mysterious than he had ever imagined.